We're one of the most successful dive clubs in the Midlands, maybe even in the country. We've got more members, we do more dive trips, we do more training, we do social events, probably better than anybody else in the country. We've had some cracking events, and we are going to have some really good events in the future. What we need to do is for all the guys that turned up tonight, the next time we have a good celebration, because if you think of 1958-ish to where we are now, we're coming up to 60 odd years of it being in existence, so there must be a big one coming up soon. So tonight we'd like to run with some of the members willing to share their stories, maybe some of the scary moments we've had when we've been out diving, maybe some of the funny incidences we've had when you've been diving, maybe some of the embarrassing times you've had when you've been diving, or maybe a steep learning curve you had when you were out diving that you've learned from, you picked up. You may want to spread that word. You may want to share that experience, whether it be diving with Ken in the river. You never know. You need to try that. That's an experience. We've got Elaine going around selling raffle tickets. Elaine, shake your bits. That's it. We all know what we mean. Now, if you haven't bought any tickets, you will be buying some, I promise you. She will get round. We are going to try and do a group photo of past, present, and existing members. There is the archive down behind the Prescotts, underneath the CSAC flag. Really worth looking at. That's got photographs from the 50s, 60s, when our club was responsible for maybe trawling the rivers looking for missing people before the police had their underwater teams. So there's lots of interesting stuff in there. There's club T-shirts dotted around, worth having a look at. I'm wearing the first one I ever got. I even had my name put on it, so I couldn't forget who I was. We said we've got some speakers. We would like some more, so if you would like to say a few words once you know what's going on, please have a word with Jeff. Richard's floating around somewhere. Let Richard know you want to speak, and I'll bring you in at a time that works for everybody. I can remember times when people jumped in without the fins, maybe without the mask or the weights, or maybe you've had one or two the night before and you wished you hadn't gone diving when you were in. Anyway, before I introduce our first tale teller, remember it's an informal night, so although there'll be somebody up here talking like myself, we did twist a few arms, but we thought that Mr. Johnson might like to come and open the cards. We did forget to tell him he was opening, but this is Andy Johnson. He's been with the club in and out for a few years.
Well, I only heard about this about 5 minutes ago. So Jeff got me as I walked through the door. The tale I could think of is we were all diving in Swanage, and people forget things, lots of things. But one of our divers, his name's Dennis Hart. Dennis is notorious for losing watches, keys, wallets. But the best thing he lost was his granddaughter. We were all back at the campsite after diving in Swanage, and somebody said, "Dennis, where's your granddaughter?" Oh my God, left her on the beach. Another funny story I can tell you is we're doing a bit of training. So we were doing management life-saving at Stony Cove. And Martin Blair, who used to be our chairman, he was in charge of the dive. And the rescue was there was a diver trapped underwater, and my job was to go down and air share while other people went to go and help out. While I was down air sharing with this diver who was trapped underwater, and this guy was sharing air with me quite happily, I realised he was nothing to do with our club at all. But he shared air with me for a good 10 minutes while everybody else was pissing themselves laughing at me. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And for that person that lost their child, their grandchild, I'd like to invite Dennis Hart to come up and get his certificate. Well done, Dennis.
Thank you.
So he's had a cracking start there with some really good stories. Now, it's going to be Digger next. God bless him. He doesn't know yet, but he does now. While he's making his way up to talk to you all, There is one story I'll throw in just to keep us going. Morris is here. I did remind him about it. He's not coming up. We actually tried to sacrifice him to the harvest down south. But that's not the story. That's one that will come up later, I'm sure. But Morris was my buddy in Scapa, and as you do, you plan your dive and you dive your plan. Now, we both had a good conversation about what would happen if we got separated, only I forgot. So anyway, he was up on the surface for about 20 minutes before I got up, and he was pretty pissed, I'll be honest. We had a real good talking to, or at least I did. But we didn't do it again, did we? Well, I didn't. Anyway, I'd like to introduce Digger. He's normally got some good stories, really good ones, sometimes even about himself. Here's Digger.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to need Vernon on this one because he was a witness.
Just in case you don't know who he is, this is Vernon.
Can't do anything alone, can he?
The older boys in the club like their lobsters and crabs and catching them. Probably about 30% of the club.
And the rest.
We was on a diving trip out of Weymouth, I think.
Weymouth, yeah.
About 50 metres.
Then some, yeah.
And Vernon, it was supposed to be my job to carry the bag and Vernon's job with the crab hook.
Yeah.
So we found this crab in the bow of a ship.
How big was it, Dig?
It was the size of a dinner plate. So I'm now opening the bag, and I'm not keen on these things, to be truthful. I don't tell many people, but held the bag open, thinking we're never going to get this crab in this bag. It's just not going to.
It was a struggle. It was a struggle.
So
At 50 metres, it was a very, very much a struggle.
managed to get it in. I hooked it on me. We got back on the boat. I thought, oh well, this is going to be a story to tell. This is going to get Ken. And then I said to Vernon, "Gives a look at that crab then, Vernon. Where is it?"
How big was it?
It wasn't even a keeper.
A lesson in narcosis.
And I would have swore blind it was a big old crab.
It looked big down there.
So be careful with narcosis, and if you are going to tell stories underwater, make sure you've got a witness. Thank you very much.
Thought while we're going, Vernon was one of our chairmen for quite some time. He was a DO when he turned up, some of our time. But he was chairman for a few years, weren't you? Actually, talking about chairman, how many? I was chairman once. We've got Carl was chairman. There's one hand. Vernon was a chairman. Who else we got? Sal was a chairman. Chairman over here. How many more chairmen have we got? And we got a recent chairman. That's excellent. But our next presentation will be for Steve Kelly. And if I've got a chairman, thank you. Join us, okay. Have we got any other people who would like to volunteer and come and say a few words? Mr. Plum, you're next on my list. I think everybody knows Dave Plum.
I've been sucking on my I started diving in 73, and I'm sure Ken will sort of expand on this a bit. At the time, computers, BCDs, dry suits, they just weren't around at all. So we dived on a watch and a depth gauge. Back in 2000, I then joined this club. I think Salvatore, where's Salvatore? I think you were organising a trip to Scapa Flow, so in 2000, yeah. And I volunteered for that, and I just bought myself a computer. And I'd never used a computer before, ever. Prior to that, all the diving I did, I'd come up to about 6 metres and just sort of hang around for a bit. We were diving me and a young lady who's not here tonight, we were diving the Brummer, 31.5 metres. We did the dive, came up the shot. I got to 6 metres. I thought, well, this is the time to stop. Looked at my computer, couldn't understand a thing it was trying to tell me. So I just hung on and hung on and hung on. After 29 minutes, my buddy, who's now really, really naffed off, suggested that we pop up. So that dive turned into like a 70-minute dive. And the lesson to be learned now is if you do buy a computer, it would be really, really handy if you know at what depth you've got to stop. Because at the time, my computer just didn't count down at all. It's the longest non-deco dive I've ever done.
Well, thank you very much. And Dave has done some pretty long dives. Say something about the Mary Rose because it's actually just in the news again, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
For those who don't know, he was actually down at the beginning when they were raising it. Thank you, Mr. Plum. So there was Vern and I and the two Prescotts, and there was my wife and somebody else. 6 of us joined at the same time. But Mary Endley, who was there as sort of a welcoming person, she's always been really enthusiastic about diving. And part of the deal was I just passed my ticket, and my wife was thinking of doing it, so she was in the pool having a little check. I was swimming, as you do. In those days, we were up at Livingston. That pool's now been demolished, but in the early days, we started life at Livingston. And I was swimming up and down, and Mary was swimming up and down. She stopped, and she, as she does, she talks to you. She's really good at talking and welcoming new members. And she started talking to me about her new computer. Now, having only just got into diving, I didn't even know about watches, never mind computers. So I then responded with, well, actually, I've just got a cordless mouse today. She looked at me and then started swimming again. And it took her weeks to speak to me again. It's only now I realise what an absolute prat I must have sounded. But at the time, I had just got myself a cordless mouse for my computer, as you do. Good stuff. Good man. This is Ken. Ken loves crab and lobster. If you want to know how to dress a crab, he's your man. If you want to know how to catch a lobster, he's your man. And obviously, don't worry about narcosis. He knows exactly where they are and what they are. Over to you, Ken.
Digger was talking about a dive at 50 metres, and it reminded me of a dive a few years back. We all went on a week's liverboard on the Manly. It was when Normandy was opened up to diving in about 97. And we all piled down in a minibus down to Brighton Marina, got there at 2 o'clock, and we weren't sailing till that night. So guess where we ended up first of all? In the pub for about 6 hours. So we got on the boat, got our kit on, went out that night, and the next morning we was diving at 5 o'clock in the morning, force 5. Got up at my bunk, feeling sick, had an egg on a piece of dry toast, feeling even more sick, and then Paul Owen says, are we diving or not? So jumps over the side, goes down 50 metres, been sick all the way down, knocked out my brains, and what's the first thing I find is a big lobster. And the skipper said before we get in, don't bring that out, because we was in mid-channel. He said, because the police in France will have us. So I'm sitting there knocked with this big lobster like this, and I thought, no, flung it away. And then this wreck, it was a Virgin wreck was diving on. There was all portholes in a big long line. And the next thing, I seen this lifting bag coming down with a porthole on it, and Elaine had sent it up. Do you remember? And I thought, another porthole. So I put it in a bag, got Elaine's one, and I said to Elaine, leave it to me. Wrapped it all up, sent it all up. We never ever seen them portholes again. But I might tell you some more later, basically. All right.
Thank you, Ken. Yes, we must invite Ken back to talk a bit about river diving. He's probably our expert on it.
Andre, commonly known as the Admiral. We did a week's liverboard in the Red Sea. We did a brilliant week's diving. And on the last night in the hotel, me and Patrick went to the reception and complained to the hotel. It was a fabulous hotel, which it wasn't. There were brilliant staff. And they had not been saluting our Admiral, Andre Farndon, while serving him at the table. So then the whole hotel spent the next 24 hours saluting Andre at every given chance they could. Then Patrick decided it was a good idea to tell the captain of the plane on the way back that Andre was retiring and to congratulate him on his service to the military. He stood up on the plane and the whole plane was clapping to him. For years later, and probably to this day, some of the crew in the Red Sea still call him the Admiral. It took me 12 years to get to sport diver.
Thanks, Digger. That's brilliant. This is Mr. Farmed and Andre.
I've just got to get my own back on digger. I've taught one or two people to dive over the years, and Paul's probably been one of the easiest to dive, but he got to a stage where he was struggling with his trim in the water, and he was getting a bit annoyed the one night. So when we got out the water and we were in the pub, we got to the pub and I said, Paul, I need to speak to you about your attitude in the water. He says, there's nothing wrong with my attitude. I said, but it should just switch on as soon as you jump in. Shouldn't be a problem. So we're on this dive and we're finning around, and he kept looking at his computer and looking at his computer and looking at his computer. And apparently it was a bargain, this computer. So in the end, I looked at it, bearing in mind we're down about 20, 25 metres, looked at his computer, and I thought, this is Chinese. It's reading in Chinese. Couldn't understand what it was. Couldn't work out what it was. So when we got back on the surface, I realised that he'd actually put his computer on upside down.
That's what tonight's about, really. If you can log on to one of the comments that's been made and think, I can remember something like that. That's really what we want to get on with. It doesn't have to be up here. It can be sitting around a table having a chat and use, remember when we did that? Or remember what happened when that happened? Probably my greatest issue as chairman was getting involved with the RNLI.
When we went to South Africa, Mozambique in 1999, it's a shark story. We spent about 2 days getting there. We flew into Joburg from Heathrow, and then we went Joburg up the coast, and then we was diving East London. And we used to go out in these ribs, and it was the first day, and the guy that took us, Paul Owen, he was a fanatic. He said, you got to look professional. This bloke's got to think you know what you're doing. So we're all getting kitted up and everything else, and he said, don't let us down. So, and the way that it worked was you all went over the side, you paired up, and this guy had a float, and then he sent another line down with a strobe on it and some sparkling bits and pieces to attract the little fish, which attract the sharks. So we all 1, 2, 3, all over the side off the rib. The trouble was Eric forgot to do his fins up very tight, and both of them weren't flying off. He managed to grab one, put it on, and then the other one lost it. So I was at the back with Eric, stuck with me buddy, and Eric was swimming like that. And the other people went in front of us. They were way in front of us. And we've been in the water about 5 minutes, haven't we? And the next minute, the shark comes out of the gloom, and me and him are looking at it like this, and I'm thinking, this is awesome. And it's getting closer and closer, and it's about a 12-foot shark with a great big eye, and I'm looking like that, and he's the same. And this guy that took us, Andy Cobb, he was on a lot of the Discovery programs and everything. He had to drag back with his float and everything else and chased it off with a shark gun. And then we carried on the dive. We lost them, didn't we? Because you couldn't keep up. There was just the two of us. And at the end, he came up to us and he said, you stupid pair of, I can't repeat it because the kids here sort of thing. He says, do you know what you were diving with? And I said, a shark. He said, what sort of shark do you think it was? I said, a big one. And he said, you were diving with a tiger. And we said, was we? We hadn't got a clue. And he reckons the only reason it didn't go for us because we just didn't show no fear. We were just puddled. We were just looking at it like this sort of thing. But yeah, that was our shark experience, wasn't it?
So, say while we're waiting for one or two more people to take a seat and get a feel, One of the favourite things we do as divers is play practical jokes on people. We played loads. You've probably seen Vernon, he came up earlier. One of our first trips to Scapa Flow, he decided to try a hard hat dive and managed to catch himself with a bit of cellulitis. Ha. While he was in a bit of a comatose state in bed, a digger approached him with black bags on and a scythe and suggested that he was on his last legs. I understand at the time we had a diver in the club that was also the consultant pathologist, a guy called Klaus, and he suggested that he ought to check if Vernon was dead or not. Turns out he wasn't, as we can see, but he didn't do any more diving that week.
This is when we went to CSAC. Mr. Green, Lord Green over there, he organised a trip. We've been diving about 3 days, and the dive skipper said to us, he said, I've got a job for 2 of you. Will you be help the stuntman? And me and Tommy Turrell said, yeah, we'll do that. So we did our 2 dives that day, and then we jumped on this boat, and they took us out, and there was a film crew. And it was quite funny. We sat, and the stuntman, he briefed us. What we had to do was this guy was going to be shot, dropped off the boat, and we had to grab him, take him underneath the boat, and stick a mouthpiece in, and take him out the other side. So we sat there for about 3 hours on this boat, and there was food, crisps, sandwiches, everything else. And so we just sat there eating. And there was also about 5 or 6 dummies. There's a picture of them there. And they cost 12 grand each. And they were supposed to be skeletons. It was part of the film. So we was called over after about 3 or 4 hours. And we thought it'd be funny to get one of the skeletons and stick a cheese roll in its mouth. But we didn't realise they were actually filming this boat. It was going over. It was part of the film. So we goes over, and then the director goes absolutely ape shite because we'd ruined his scene, sort of thing, with a dummy with a cheese batch sticking out of his mouth, sort of thing. And he was cut. Who did that? And we were all going, don't know. But they kicked us off the next day because we were supposed to be diving the next day with them, sort of thing. But it was quite lucrative, actually, because they paid us about 300 quid for the afternoon each. But it took us about 3 days to get it. We had to queue up at this little place where they're paying us. And Tommy was Mickey Mouse and I was Donald Duck when we signed for the money, sort of thing. You know?
A lot of you know Mary. She used to dive with you guys, some of you older fellas, quite some time, didn't she? And over the years, she got a little bit frail, and she eventually hurt her back some time ago. Must be about 3 or 4 years ago. Now, at the time, she wanted to get back into diving, and she was struggling having a 12-litre on her back even. So I said, well, okay, I'll dive with you. So she said, well, look, I only want to do 6 metres. This is at Stony Cove. So, okay, I'll take you 6 metres. That's all we're going to do. So we get everything ready. She faffed a little bit for half an hour, but she eventually got the thing to go. Okay, we're going to jump in. We jumped in. We went down to the cockpit, I think. Then we worked our way back along. And as we come to the submarine in there, and we come up to the conning tower. So we all know the conning tower's what, 2 metres, 3 metres down? She suddenly starts going, I'm going, what's up with you? She, no. Anyway, when I got to the surface, there was like expletives coming out of Mary's mouth that was like, I really don't want to say what she was saying, but she was seriously giving me some stick. I'm going, what's wrong? She goes, you took me too deep. You took me too deep. I go, I didn't. We've been on 6 metres. No, you took me too deep. We got out, took the stuff off. She wouldn't talk to me for about 10 minutes. But then she come over to me. She goes, Steve, I'm sorry. But I was swearing at you out there. And I goes, yeah, I know you were. I don't know what I've done. She goes, well, she says, I had my computer upside down and I seen that you took me to 9 metres. I goes, oh, okay then, well, apology accepted sort of thing.
I mean, if it's like that, you're in trouble. So anyway, Dawn and I were in there, minding our own business, enjoying ourselves, having a look here and having a look
And
there,
me.
and we got a bit out. We got a bit out of control. We was there a little bit too long, weren't we? And we looked out the window, and what did you see, Dawn?
The weed was like that.
They were like that. Steve was just round the corner, waiting.
Yeah, I was basically, I think I led the dive. What actually happened was, I said it's about time we left, and I started making my way out. Turned round, and they weren't there. Turned round again.
I was just about to go and join him, but the current was pushing me back. I turned round, and Dawn was.
Feet to the ceiling. Literally. Right up.
And could she get down? No. He came crawling back in. I came crawling across to her, and we pulled and we tugged and we huffed and we puffed.
Yeah, between the pair of us, we dragged her down.
Dragged her down, got her out the side of the blocks. Bear in mind, we're only in about 18 metres. But we got round the corner, and when you said go, we let go, got in the current, and we flew. We were doing 3, 4, 5 knots maybe. The current is extreme. But that was Dawn's experience of being stuck to the ceiling.
So fast that it goes up and then goes diagonal. So it sends a DSMB up, probably 30 or 40 metres of line on only like 10 metres of water. So I'm starting to reel it in, and Dawn decides she's going to hold on to my arm. So she's holding onto my arm, and I'm struggling to wind this thing up. And then all of a sudden, she goes and decides to grab the reel, but she hits the release. And next thing you know, the DSMB line's going out again, and I'm now trying to hold on to this line. So when we eventually got on the boat, Emily told me, she says, another 2 or 3 minutes, and we'd been out to sea. We had travelled miles. We really did. Yeah.
The programme on the TV about the Mary Rose, I think it's the 40th anniversary. All the underwater excavation stuff was basically done by volunteers. I was lucky enough to be there about 80, 81. Probably did about 24 hours underwater time in that time. All solo diving, which obviously is absolute taboo today. All solo diving. The wreck was covered in a grid system. On the mothership, they had two lines, one to the bow, one to the stern. And they'd just sort of say to me, right, Dave, just go down to all up 5 and just carry on for an hour or so. We didn't have computers at that time. And when your time was up, they'd just get a hammer and just whack the ladder. And that was your signal to come up. Generally speaking, as divers, we dive slack water, don't we? But on the Mary Rose, we never dived slack water at all. The wreck lies north to south. The currents in the Solent run east to west, west to east. So you'd go down, there'd be like a drain pipe with an on-off handle at the base, which was attached to a compressor on the boat. So you'd be there with your little trowel and your net bag and all your other bits and pieces, and you'd turn this on and it would suck all the spoil away. And because we were diving in a current, you'd have a spoil heap either side of the wreck. So when it was slack water, if you dived slack water, they used to send me down to a part of the wreck, and I had to hang on a trapeze. So I'd spend 30, 40 minutes hanging upside down, digging away with this little trowel. And every now and then my contents gauge would get sucked into the tube. I'd have to pull it out. But a fantastic experience. But, you know, like I say, we was all just basically people like we are now, really. Just volunteers. Absolutely wonderful experience.
I've been diving for 13 years now with this club, and out of them 13 years, for 12 years I've been diving with Ken out in the rivers, and I'm still diving at 12 years later, and I still haven't found a cod. Not a cod piece, a cod bottle. I've still never found one. So I've come up with this idea that Ken is actually a magician. Because the number of pictures that I put on, because every time I go in, he goes in with nothing, but he always comes out with all sorts of bottles and pots and whatever. And I'm always coming out with next to nothing. And I reckon he's a magician. I just want to say that I think he's actually a magician. And he's got them stuffed in his trousers before he goes in from the ones that he's dived before and he's picked up. Because that's the way he is.
This is younger people. You better hold your ears while I'm telling this story. It's we went one Wednesday afternoon. Me and John the Hat. Poor guy is now deceased, but the week before I'd been river diving there, and I found this big wheel, and I thought I'm going to get that out. So the next week we went there, jumped in the water. Goes across, finds it, and I rolls it across the bottom of the river, comes up, sticks my head up, and what's there but a man and a lady doggy style. And I'm there going like this. And they're just there going. I drops down expecting the next thing, ba-dum, 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 lobbing bricks at me, but no sign of it. And I carries on my dive, and I thought, they're going to be waiting for me when I come out, sort of thing, but no sign of them afterwards. So that's my erotic river diving story. A lot of the golf courses, getting a lot of the golf balls out. And we used to do the Belfry. Well, what happened was at the Belfry golf course, this guy had the contract to get all the golf balls out. And unfortunately, the diver that was doing it, he took his grandson there, went in, had a heart attack, and he had all these golf balls, and he was just hanging there, and they had to bring him out. And he died there. So they wouldn't let nobody go in for a while, and it was only because I worked in insurance, I got the PI cover to actually go diving there. So we proved we got we was like capable and everything else. So we started diving there, and it's quite lucrative if you go in the Belfry course, dive there and get about 4,000 balls out. And the golf pro Peter McGovern, he used to give us about 10p a ball. This is going back in the 80s or something like that. And we turns up, we goes in, we're in wetsuits, and it's freezing. There's snow on the ground, everything else. Goes in, does half hour, fills the sack up, comes out, and we had a flask of OXO, puts it in our gloves because we couldn't feel our hands. And I said to the guy I was with, Arthur, I said, I'll do another 10 minutes, go down and get some more balls out. So jumps back in, and I'm in there, and it was the visors crap, and I'm putting my hand round like this, and you can feel the golf balls, and you put them in the sack. The next minute, I feel this hand grabs my hand, and puts it in a hole, and the hole was just absolutely full of golf balls. And I put it all, filled my sack up in about 5 minutes. And I came out, and I said to my dive buddy Arthur, I said, "How did you know that was there?" He said, "I haven't been back in." And we talked to the golf pro. And it was exactly the place where that guy died, getting the golf balls out. So, hairs on the back of my head, never ever went back there. The golf pro used to ring me up and said, come and get some more balls out. I said, I ain't going back there. No way. So, that's my ghostly story.
Thank you, Ken. There you go.
That's broken up. That's about 5 of us. Can't be seen now.
Hands in the air! Yay! International bollocks! Yay! Victorian pose.
Don't go away yet. Tell Sal checked it. Do you want to check it, Sal, before we go?
No.
You happy?
I'll have to be.
Okay, everybody, back to where you were.